Hello, Anastasia. How are you doing?
I am exhausted. I'm pretty tired. I feel like the last few weeks of work have been pretty intense. So trying to keep up with the tennis and work has been super exhausting. But we're doing it. We're trying.
Yes, it's been a challenge for me as well. Although having said that, I'm not working necessarily the hours that you are. So I feel like the opportunity to watch a lot of it has been missed. But hey, that's why we're fans and we're not working in it.
Yeah.
But there's been plenty to keep us occupied with. In the meantime, I mean, look, hopefully you guys have been listening to all the mini pods we've been recording to kind of get your tennis fix if you're not able to watch.
Yes. Those have been actually great. So if you don't know, we also have a YouTube channel where I don't really do much. When I was on site at tournaments, like there were videos with players and like some, practices and stuff that I put on there. But for the most part, our podcast automatically just loads up onto YouTube. It's another way you can listen to us. And I've actually been getting some really nice messages on YouTube about like the mini pods and people enjoying them. So that's been nice. So that's been great. The hard work is appreciated.
Yeah, and I guess it's nice to know that we are appreciated, and I definitely hope that you enjoyed Anastasia's challenges review that she recorded with, I forget the man's name, but he was very interesting to listen to.
Jeff Pittman. Jeff Pittman was a second AD on the movie Challengers. He got to work on it, and he's an assistant director. I'm an assistant director. So that was a fun conversation to have. He had the dream job. I was really jealous. He got to work with Brad Gilbert for months. He was telling me how, during their lunch breaks, he would just go volley with Brad Gilbert. And I'm like, that's the dream. Just have Brad Gilbert comment on your volleys. That would be great.
I'm hoping he is actually now better at tennis and will be giving it a go.
I really hope. I mean, he's a casual player and also casual fan. I hope you listen to the episode, our listeners, because it was really great, sort of, because he's almost also the audience for this podcast. He played tennis when he was younger. He only watches the slams, so doesn't really keep in touch with the tournaments in between. So he's pretty much the audience for this podcast. It was a really great conversation. And it's just, it was nice talking to him about Challenges the movie, but jumping into our conversations of today, we're just going to sort of bop around a little bit about all the stuff that's been going on a little bit off court in tennis. And there are a lot of tennis movies either happening right now or coming soon. It's kind of a moment.
And again, it's mostly documentaries, which I think it works for the sport, because one of the reasons why we love tennis is hearing these real people's stories and what they went through to get there, and what they went through to get success. And you can really empathize a lot more when watching individuals as opposed to a team, which is what most sports tend to be. And what's great is these documentaries really highlight that. Breakpoint, although wasn't super effective in some ways, did give you some insight into it. But we've talked a lot about resurfacing, which we spent a whole episode talking about with Andy Murray. And we're getting a couple more coming. One is about Stan Smith, who was a player 50 years ago, where reached the world number one in 1972 before they had computer rankings. And obviously it was kind of a hey, if you've not heard of Stan Smith, this is who he is, because I think very much the documentary is marketed around Stan Smith's a shoe brand, right? So and that's what people know from. And actually, interestingly enough, there's a similar phenomenon in the UK with much older players. Like Fred Perry is a fashion brand in the UK, obviously known as like the last English player to win Wimbledon, and for many decades was the last British player, had until Andy Murray eventually won Wimbledon and a Grand Slam, actually. And then if you look at like wider, like Lacoste, René Lacoste was a tennis player. And obviously Lacoste is one of the most recognized fashion brands in the world. So it was interesting. It's interesting to go, oh, right, tennis is actually at the center of of fashion, but this is more of an insight into Stan Smith. He seems like a genuinely nice guy, and that should be really interesting to see when that's coming out.
Yeah, no, totally. I got to get a screener of the movie. So I've seen the movie, the Stan Smith documentary. And, I thought I knew who Stan Smith was as someone who's locked in a little bit to tennis. And I had no idea. His story is so phenomenal. And I couldn't imagine a lovelier person. Just hearing his story and what he's done for his community and everything, it was a pretty phenomenal documentary. It's very the screenings are happening now, and it's very limited. I think it's making its way slowly around the country. I know there was a screening in LA and there was one in New York, and now they're finally going other places in the United States. I don't know if it is international yet, but keep up with our social media channels. And once it is, and once I know what dates and where it's going to be played, I will post something about it, because this is definitely worth watching, learning about a player. Because I think brands like Fred Perry, Lacoste, they're very, you still know they're tennis brands, even if you didn't know they were named after tennis players. Stan Smiths are such a cultural phenomenon. Like, people wear Stan Smiths and love Stan Smiths who have never watched tennis and have no idea that it's even a tennis player, let alone, someone as great as Stan Smith was. So, definitely want to watch. And of course, we have my calendar is set. My calendar is set for June 20th. I'm going to have a box of tissues, and I'm going to turn on Amazon Prime to watch the Federer documentary, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm definitely watching that as well. Roger was my favorite player for many, many years, so it's going to be interesting seeing. I didn't realize it would take like nearly 2 years for all that to come out, but I'm assuming they had to stitch everything together and they had to get permission for what could and couldn't be used and whatnot. You probably know a bit more about making documentaries than I do. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what we're into with that and seeing what Federer is like behind the scenes, especially since, there's a certain level that Federer comes across as very polished, and that does rub people up the wrong way sometimes. And it might give us a bit of an insight into sort of who he is, a bit like Resurfacing did with Andy Murray. And obviously it's about Roger, so of course I'm going to pay attention to it. But yes, I'm expecting it to be obviously revisiting those emotional scenes in London for the when his last match was. If the tickets hadn't been so expensive, I would have gone. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. Although slight tangent though, have you seen the Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Louis Vuitton clips? I don't even know. They're not even adverts. I don't even know what they are. But
I've seen them.
I've seen the clip where they're like teasing each other. I find it very odd because it's clearly it's not quite an advert and it's not quite a proper documentary, and they're sat being filmed in the falling snow, which does not look comfortable.
But it seems like they're having so much fun. So I've been trying to figure out exactly what it is. It seems like, from what I've read, it's a campaign that Louis Vuitton do as sort of, they have these ambassadors, and they seem to be sort of athletes. I believe the last time they did this, or the only one I remember before this, they had Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo were in the campaign. That was a few years ago. So now this is the next one, and it's Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal. So it's some sort of campaign. I'm not exactly sure what they're promoting other than Louis Vuitton, but they're supposed to be some sort of ambassadors of good, I think.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's
or it's just content for us, or it's just Fidel content.
I'll take just content. I absolutely loved the conversation where Rafa kind of teased Roger about being a little bit arrogant when they first met. Which is the impression some people have of Roger, and obviously, but there's generally, you can tell it's just friendly banter between two good friends. That I might have to go and watch the whole thing at some point. I just haven't had time. But it's worth checking out. It's nice and easy to do than necessarily trying to dig out a film. I just looked at the Stan Smith film, That's not out in the UK as far as I can tell. I just Googled it. There is no cinema at least near me showing it. Roger Federer documentary is coming out in a month, so we've got a little bit of a wait for that. But
Yes.
I'm assuming there'll be a review out on this channel at some point.
Oh, definitely. I'm counting down the days till I get to watch it because it seems like it's going to be a pretty emotional one. But yeah, I'm going to put a link to the video, the full video that Louis Vuitton put out. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's a really fun sort of Q&A conversation. Vogue do these things where it's kind of like, they ask someone 73 questions. So it's very similar. It's in that vein. But yeah, I will post that on. But yeah, so a few films coming. I do know there is a fictional tennis movie. Unfortunately, I don't know the name of it, but I will post it below, that was just premiered at Cannes. It's an independent film that just happened. So I will post that. But yeah, tennis is definitely in the zeitgeist, and it's in the fashion world. So it's very interesting to see the sport kind of have a little bit of a moment this summer. What else is happening off court? Well, we always talk about on this channel, how do you watch tennis? It's one of the, hardest things to do, it seems like. Even in my conversation with Jeff Pittman during the Challenges interview, the first thing he mentioned, it's like, it's so hard to follow and watch tennis. Well, the U.S. Open announced that the U.S. Open men's final this year is coming to ABC. And for those who don't know, there are basically three big channels in the United States. It's NBC, ABC, and CBS. And back in the day, back in Pete Sampras land and Andre Agassi, when tennis, I think, was more popular in the States, you could watch the U.S. Open and a lot of tournaments on just regular television, that all you needed was sort of your cable subscription or whatever regular television you had. Now it's harder. You either have to have Tennis TV or ESPN for some slams, but they're saying the men's final is coming to ABC. That means if you have regular cable, you can turn on your TV at the time the men's final is happening and watch it on NBC. And that is just so big, because I think a lot of what the sport needs is just exposure. And if people can't just stumble on a tennis match, it's kind of hard to do that. You found the name of the movie. What was the name of the movie that premiered at Cannes?
Julie Keeps Quiet. It's a Belgian film. It's definitely set around tennis with its kind of its central setting, but it's kind of more around kind of similar kind of questions that the Me Too movement were asking or have been asking. So that's kind of the themes going on there.
Yeah. So again, it's like tennis all around. But yeah, this is big news. It's big news for the States. It's, for you, this is the equivalent of Wimbledon being on the BBC.
Yeah, which it already is. So I guess the equivalent would be like Wimbledon being on Sky, and then the BBC getting the men's final. I think I might have mentioned this before, but that would be unlikely, because actually by law, the Wimbledon final has to be on public television in the UK, by law. It sounds ridiculous, but it's genuinely there.
I would love that in the States. That would be so great. If by law the US Open had to be available to everyone to watch, it's all about accessibility and, sort of providing that as a service. It's a local tournament to the States, a big major. It'd be great, but, money talks and media rights talk.
US Open final coming on ABC. So,
yeah. And
I'm aware that's a big deal as well. And you're right, it will be an opportunity for people to kind of stumble across tennis and watch it. And I really, really hope, because is it from this year?
Yes.
Yeah. So I really hope that we get especially hope we get a really good US Open final this year that's going to spark imaginations. Imagine if we get Alcaraz Sinner repeating their 2022 battle or something like that. I could see tennis really exploding with that. I would want to know your opinion on the time change, because the time is now being moved to 2 hours early, so 2 p.m. Eastern rather than 4 p.m. Eastern. It works a lot better for those of us in Europe. So that would start 7, 8 p.m. for us rather than 9 or 10 p.m. Sort of UK, Central European time. But like moving it to sort of earlier in the afternoon, is that a slot that works well for the US?
Because it is a Sunday, definitely, 100%. And it also helps with the fact that there are other sports in the States that would take precedent 100%, whether or not it's the US Open final. So basketball, American football would preempt the match. So I think in order to avoid this, they've moved the final up earlier to help with that situation. Because if there was a football game, which there will be, it's a Sunday, that would preempt it on ABC.
Yeah, there you go. So it's exciting times for the US. So I really hope that's a massive success. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the thing for this.
Yeah, and just to mention too, because I know people bring it up, and I've seen it already being mentioned. This is only the men's final. They're not doing this for the women's final, which would be great if they were.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping this is a step in getting there. But it is a shame that we'll only get it on the men.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a certain extent, when we talk about capturing the imagination, yeah, you can celebrate there being a close quality contest. Right now, an American man, or even two American men being in the US Open final now is a long shot. No offense to the top guys like Taylor Fritz or Francis Tiafoe. I could see Ben Shelton doing it. If he, as he develops, maybe seeing him doing it. See how Alex Mickelson comes on, but in the short term, it's kind of hard to see. But like, hey, that's for the players to prove me wrong. If you put the women's final on prime time on the on like main TV, like public TV, that's a whole different ballgame. Imagining Coco Gauff winning on prime time for anyone to kind of stumble across and watch her scrap her way to the US Open title. You've got Pegula in the mix as well, who is a relatively realistic contender. You've got Danielle Collins right now, who's about to try and finish her career on a high, and she's coming for that US Open. You better believe it. You've got far more chance of seeing American success, which I think would potentially excite an audience a little bit more, aside from wider issues around this. And I think there's a conversation to be had around, hey, make the most of what you have, because you've got some amazing stars. I find it difficult to believe that the same thing would have happened 10 years ago when we had Serena with the Big Four.
Oh, totally. We would be watching the women's final 100%. So fingers crossed it's coming. Last thing, just to talk about before we get into the tournaments that happened this week is, I think we mentioned this before, or maybe I just put it on our social media channels, but the WTA have released a new platform called WTA Unlocked, and it's equivalent to the ATP Challenger TV. Now, ATP Challenger TV, it's where you can watch all the Challenger tournaments for free, streamed, live as it's happening. The camera angles are not always the best, but you're getting free tennis, and you're also getting exposure to younger tennis players. What I would also say, though, which I kind of want to bring up, is what I've noticed with the longer Masters schedule is we're getting a lot of stacked challengers in the second week of a Masters. So, I think before we're just like, oh, I don't really know a lot of players in the challengers and who are playing, and it's harder for you to follow because you don't know who to root for. Right now, we just had, Challenger event in Turin, which was the second week of Rome, and you had like Lorenzo Musetti, you had a lot of big Italian names playing, you had Andy Murray in a Challenger in Bordeaux. So second weeks of majors, challengers can get really exciting. And that also happens on the WTA side. So the WTA have now released WTA Unlocked. You can register for free and watch WTA tournaments at the 1-5 level for free. Yeah. And it includes doubles too. I checked. Will Buchek, who did an interview with us a while back all about doubles, was asking that question, and I was able to check out the service, and they do singles and doubles. And I think it's great. I think it's a great way to get into tennis for free at no cost. You're watching younger, lower ranked players come up the rankings. And just in the world of tennis, I always say, especially when you're in the top 100, anything can happen. And we're about to talk about Rome and the second week of Rome, about what all happened in Rome. But yeah, I think it's a really great service. I don't know. I think you haven't checked it out yet, but what do you think in general?
No, I haven't. And the pure reason for that is I haven't had the time, and a lot's been going on in Rome. I'm loving the idea. Like, I'm so excited by the idea of tuning into a WTA 125K at last, because yeah, you're right. That's where we see the young talent breaking through. That's the opportunity to go and see the new up and coming players. And often, like at certain points of the year, it's actually where a lot of excitement is in the tournament. So like this Paris one that's just happened was won by Denis Schneider beating Emma Navarro in the final. Both top 100 players, and it looked like a really, really good match. Now, obviously, it's like kind of stacked because of sort of what happened in Rome. But yeah, if there's an opportunity to watch, like maybe finals or whatnot, I will definitely be tuning in. I'm definitely going to be signing up for it. And more tennis isn't gonna hurt me. But like going back to my point about sort of more excitement, like when you're looking at the lower ranks, like trying to break into the top 100, like this week I've been updating people on Twitter about the race to qualify for Wimbledon, because 6 weeks before each slam is when the cutoff is for the players to get automatic entry and not have to go through like actual qualifying tournament. So like these lower ranked events like Paris and Turin on the ATP side, Bordeaux, that's where the action's at, because we've got all these players trying to get a last gasp chunk of points to get them in the top 100 and get that automatic qualification. They are definitely, and they know they're definitely going to be in the Wimbledon main draw in a few weeks' time. So there was definitely some drama there along those lines. You were trying to see players like Erika Andreeva, Mira's older sister, trying to get over the line, didn't quite make it. So yeah, that I think it kind of pushes its own drama. And I think one of the good things about the Challengers movie for the Challengers and the 125K events is it actually opens that door for like how much of a hard graft tennis is. And you can see that, especially since, as you're right, like it does feel a lot more rough and ready watching it. Imagine being there.
I was talking in the commentary, in the review that I did. I was so happy they picked the challenger level to set this movie, because I think they could have easily done this in the US Open and it still would have told the same story. But they chose a more sort of realistic way of showing what the everyday tennis player goes through, which was great. But yeah, so that's pretty much what's been happening off court in tennis. Just a note on Masters 1000s and WTA 1000s being 2-week-long events. This has been in the discussion a lot. We wanted to maybe talk about it this week, but then this would be maybe a 4-hour-long podcast, and we don't want that. So leave us your notes. You've been watching 2-week events. What do you think about them? Do you think they're too long, then they drag on? Do you think it's the perfect amount of time? Do you think a hybrid would maybe do well? Send us an email, send us a note on Instagram, on Twitter, wherever you find us. And I think we will do an episode about 2-week Masters and 1000 level, WTA 1000 level events sometime this year. We'll gather up all your thoughts and like have a great conversation about it. But now we are in Rome. We are in Rome.
I wish we were actually in Rome, because
I really do.
I like, first of all, I know people who've actually gone and absolutely loved it. Now there's a certain element of Rome's a very popular destination to visit anyway. So not only have you got the tennis in Rome, but you've got the sights of Rome, the vibe of Rome. But having watched tennis at Rome all week, oh my word, it looks like they're playing tennis in some kind of ancient ground where this sport has been played for millennia. Like that main stadium they have, that center court, is just gorgeous in its design. Just the vibe of everyone being there. Obviously, it's Italian fans, it's Mediterranean fans. They do get a little bit rowdy sometimes. But if you want sort of sunshine and tennis, I can't think of a better place to visit than Rome, just by looking at the TV. I would definitely go. A friend of ours, Mario Baccardi, who you can follow, I think he's on Twitter and Threads, actually.
I think he is. Yeah,
he's someone that has been going to Rome almost every year for most of his life, and he's always really excited whenever he gets to go.
It's just looking at all the social media photos that the tournament has posted, and even just watching the matches. So I've loved that Rome has picked like different angles to show the matches. So they have a camera that's behind the players on court level. And I was watching the highlights of the Jerry and Zverev final, and it just felt like they were inside of the Colosseum, because it seems like the walls of the stadium are so high, and there was this image of just Jari serving and just like a crowd of people like all the way up. And I was like, what it must feel like to be a player in the middle of that sort of Colosseum type court, but also what it must be like to be an audience member and just enjoying the tennis in these historic grounds, as you say. It seems like they have all these like Roman Greek statues all around, and it just seems like such a beautiful tournament to go to. And it's on the wish list for.
Yeah, this is an ever-growing wish list, though. This is the problem. Both of us.
Ground Pass tour coming soon. We're just going to tour the world with the tour. That will be the day. Can't wait. But we're in Rome. What has happened? So I had a little mini pod. We talked about, the water bottle. We talked about Novak Djokovic. So the first week is gone, and then we had the second week. I feel like I should start with the ATP only because chaos ensued.
I'm not saying that nothing interesting happened on the WTA, because it did. And we got some interesting storylines in terms of the bigger picture going into the French Open. But the ATP is where all the biggest drama happened. So I think everyone's here for the drama, so let's just go there.
Let's just go right into the drama. And I think it was kicked off a little bit with the first week losing kind of the two big names of this tournament, Nadal and Novak, and this sort of uncertainty with who was going to win. I think it became a very, very wide open tournament. But for me, I think that's where the fun is. I don't know about you, but I don't like monotony. And when things get a little bit too monotonous, you're like, okay, great. So Novak's going to win this one. Sinner's going to win that one. Alcaraz is going to win that one. And it just keeps, and the rock keeps rolling down the hill. This brought to me anyway, a little bit of excitement. And I think I want to start with Alejandro Tabillo, because I think when he beat Novak in the first week, I think a lot of people, there were so many question marks behind it of, was it the water bottle? Was he concussed? And I have no comments on that. I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm just going to leave that alone. But it was sort of like, oh, that was a freak thing. But he backed it up. Tabillo got all the way to the semifinals of Rome. And this also brings me to just a little bit of a tangent discussion about the golden swing. Because I know with discussions about the calendar and too long and what do all these tournaments mean, I think the golden swing, which basically happens in the month of February in South America, on clay got a little bit of flack. It's sandwiched in between hard court events. So it's, in January we have the Australian Open on hard, and then we have sort of like Los Cabos, Indian Wells, Miami on hard. And then in the middle there, you have this clay court swing in South America, which I always love. First of all, because clay is my favorite surface, but I love the South American like fans and the atmosphere they create down there. And I think it is quite relevant that a lot of the players who did very well during the South American swing did very well in Rome. There is a correlation. And I think it also leads into the French Open, because these are the players now in form going into the French Open. So you had Alejandro Tobio, you had Nicolas Jarry doing very well and getting far, Nicolas Jarry getting all the way to the finals. But I truly enjoyed those players having their moment in the sun.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the best things about tennis is all the different stories you are in. I think what people underrate about tennis is everyone is good enough on their day. And for some people, their days come more often than others. And the people whose days come more often than others are the ones who are higher up the rankings. Tobio has been showing some great form in the clay court swing in South America. I think it does validate how good preparation it is for the French, or like building confidence on clay ahead of it, even if you have a brief break on hard courts in between. Having Tobio in the mix is there. And like, this is something that's kind of, someone's followed the WTA for as long as he has. Like, this is kind of, we're seeing the people who are complaining about the fact that before Swiatek and Sabalenka and Rybakina came on the scene, it was kind of a free for all, or it felt like, or the players who were like at the top, like Barty and Osaka, weren't having their day that often, and that was frustrating people because they, because like, where's the consistency? And I think people assume that lack of consistency means that there's a lack of quality at the top, like the
part,
and that means that, well, if you don't get an elite group moving away, they don't take the sport to new levels. And so essentially but like, no, that's not the case at all. I have seen some incredible matches between players who don't often end up at the top end. One of my favorite matches is from 2021. And actually, if any of you know a guy called Owen Lewis, he's on Twitter, he's not on Threads. He set up a site called Popcorn Tennis, and he's like a tennis, I don't know, like he's a tennis essayist, and often writes a lot about the beauty of the game. And he's written like super in-depth articles about Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer. And one of our mutual favorite matches in 2021 was Angelique Kerber, three-time world champion, against Sara Sorribes Tormo, who is nowhere near a major champion, at Wimbledon in the third round. And because it was an incredible display of athleticism and efficiency. And I think there's more than one way of looking at a tennis match, and like looking at sort of what a good tennis match looks like. And it doesn't necessarily have to be between recognizable names, or at least if it is, like you're basically expecting a Wimbledon 2008 final to happen on a regular basis. And I'm sorry, that event was special because it was special and a unique set of circumstances that led to an incredible contest. That's a flash in the back. That's like a moment in the bottle, and it doesn't allow us to appreciate how good this sport is day in and day out. I'm tracking what I see as like good matches, and I've either watched it or I've gone on social media and I've seen hype, and I've got a track. I'm making a spreadsheet of all the lists so I can like review at the end of the year and see how many good matches we had. I'm already up to 64 lines on the WTA side, and we're not even halfway through the year yet, and about similar like from the ATP. So there you go. That's what I would say is like, and there's so many different players on that list. So yeah, that's my view on the subject is enjoy the chaos, enjoy seeing the stories, and don't write off the quality that you're going to see. Like Jarry beating Tsitsipas, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit. That was the best match from Rome. And Jarry is someone who's not got this far in a tournament this size before. And it was such a good watch because you were seeing Tsitsipas looking like he's going to run away with it. And then Jarry just producing these incredible standard of tennis. The forehand was firing and Tsitsipas wasn't playing badly. He just didn't necessarily have an answer for what Jarry unlocked. And that was so good to watch.
Yeah. And a similar match, moving on from that and just enjoying what I think other people call chaos, I just call tennis, was Nicolas Jarry's next match against Tommy Paul. I think, you saw there Nicolas Jarry take the first set, Tommy fighting back in the second and go into a tiebreak. And then you had this third set that the third set of the Nicolas Jarry and Tommy Paul match was, that's when I was sort of like, I think Tommy Paul's going to win the French Open. He ended up losing the match, but it was so well played. And there was just so much fight. And seeing an American play like that on clay, where I think as sort of a group of players, other than Coco Gauff, which Coco Gauff loves clay on the women's side. She's been to the French Open final and all that. But on the men's side, it's tough to find that in current players. So it's so great to see players like Tommy Paul and Taylor Fritz just excel in the clay and like become part of the conversation. And just like you said, I think if you just stick to the names, the big names that you're like, okay, the Sinner, the Alcaraz, the Novak, and that's all you watch, I think you're missing so much great tennis. I don't think tennis should be a sport like soccer or football where you pick a team and that's your team and you follow them till the end of the earth, which is great. I think tennis allows you to enjoy the sport itself, and then you pick and choose. You have a few players who you love to follow, whose style you like, and go with that. I think I enjoy the chaos. I do. And we got a chaotic final in those words. We got a final against Alexander Zverev and Nicolas Jarry. And I think coming into this, I definitely hadn't watched any of Zverev's matches throughout the whole tournament. Hadn't watched one. So him getting to the final, I was like, okay, great. I get to see him play tennis. And, he's a third seed at this tournament because of the withdrawals and everything. And he came in as the favorite. And it kind of ended up being sort of a straightforward final. I don't think Nicolas Jarry is someone who did well early in the year. He had a really great win against Carlos Alcaraz during the Golden Swing. He plays really well. He's really a fighter. But I just think Zverev was a little bit of a level up from where he is. And maybe Jarry will get there one day. But this is Zverev's 6th Masters 1000 title. He hasn't won one. He hasn't won a title. Well, no, he has. He's won a lower level event, but he hasn't won a Masters event since the ankle roll that he suffered.
He hasn't won it since 2021.
Yeah. So even longer. Yeah.
Even longer.
Even before the ankle roll. So yeah. So he's definitely had a little bit of a drought in the Masters 1000 level tournament, and he's back and now is one of the many contenders of the French Open, which we will talk about later on in this episode. But just to say, I think the ATP side of the tournament was definitely not the name brands that you were expecting. Tsitsipas didn't make it. Rublev, who had just won Madrid, didn't make it. Casper Ruud, I think they said he has a little bit of a back issue. Hopefully he's fine for the French. But, a Zverev and Jarry final and the sort of quarterfinal selection and semifinal selection that we got to see, I thought was great. I loved this draw. I loved the way it fell apart.
By contrast, the WTA was the complete opposite.
The WTA, they're like seeds, all the seeds are all in there.
Yeah. And so we ended up with a semifinal lineup of the 4 form players at the moment.
I know it's controversial. I know it's super controversial.
It is controversial because...
But Danielle Collins is the 4th best player right now.
Interestingly, that wasn't the bit I think some people will find controversial. But anyway...
Oh, really?
No. So I'll go into that. So we've got yeah, so Rybakina didn't play. She pulled out with an illness. I think she said afterwards it was to do with allergies, but she has her immune system seems to hate her at the minute.
Yeah.
Anyway, but with this draw, that you had Swiatek playing Goff and Danielle Collins playing Arina Sabalenka, and they are the four other players who are in the spotlight in the WTA because of the results they've been getting and who they've been beating and how much better they have been than the competition. Goff is an interesting one because sort of this year so far, she's not necessarily lived up to expectations post US Open. She's won Auckland, she got to the semifinals of Australia, and then basically just keeps being beaten by players who are having an amazing week, more or less. But that has marked her down in a lot of established fans' opinion for that. But my argument is she's still winning way more matches than pretty much anyone else on tour, apart from the other people in this group. And Rome was a great reset option. She kind of got through the draw fairly comfortably until she played Iga, who she has a bit of a issue with in the rivalry because Iga has the same strength, and on clay she does them better right now. Right now, I can see that changing because Goff is still 20. She's just turned 20. She has time to turn that around. But yeah, we got that. And then we got Swiatek Sabalenka for the second final in a row. And we didn't record, although we did talk about the Madrid final because that was incredible tennis. The Rome final was a bit more straightforward because Iga won it in straight sets. And it was interesting seeing clay being played in different conditions, not at altitude, that benefited Iga a lot more because it looked like she had an answer for whatever Sabalenka could do. And I don't even think Iga needed to hit top gear sometimes. To be honest.
That's such a good point. I totally forgot about the altitude difference in Madrid because that really does, I think, suit Sabalenka a lot. And it seems like Rome, the conditions in Rome more mirror Roland Garros.
Have we broken down before why altitude affects things? Because obviously, again, we're for newer fans. We don't necessarily want to go too down the rabbit hole.
I think we did when we first were talking about Madrid. Briefly.
I think we may have done. Yeah. So like if you have listened to a previous podcast on it, we have mentioned it. Yeah. But basically the higher the altitude, the quicker the ball moves because there's less air resistance. That's all you need to know. And so that means the ball behaves differently. And in this case, it was in a way that benefited Swiatek, who loves Rome. It's her third title in Rome. And actually she hasn't lost a completed match at Rome since 2020. Which was just before she won her first slam. And that seemed to click something in her. So, yeah, I mean, look, I had a great time watching that final, but it was interesting seeing Iga in full flow over the course of Rome. Sabalenka also showing some clay court skills that we didn't necessarily expect, and maybe that's causing some reevaluation of opinions on her game. But yeah, right now, the WTA is seemingly a little bit more locked in with sort of who's going to be at the top. But the good thing about the WTA is that you're never far from someone popping up and making a difference. Like, we've still had several big titles and two of them have been won by people who came out of nowhere. There's always room for that, which I think there hasn't necessarily been on the ATP side up until recently. So still plenty of room for all the chaos, but not this time because Iga wasn't having it.
No, she wasn't. And it's weird to say, considering what I just said about the ATP, but I love the consistency on the WTA side. And maybe
make your mind up, Anastasia.
I just can't. But especially as someone who I think I've become a lot more consistent and a lot more even in watching WTA and ATP matches. Before this podcast, I was, 80% ATP, 20% WTA. And now we're slowly getting to 50-50 for both. And it's nice to have the consistency on the WTA because then I'm getting to know the players. And I cannot wait for another Arina Sabalenka and Iga final, just as much as I look forward to an Alcaraz Sinner final or even matchup just to see who's going to come up on top. I think having consistent rivalries is very different than just overall consistency. Like there are just some matchups and matches that I would love to see over and over and over again. You know, Coco and Iga. I want to see that to see, does Coco finally get a leg up? Does she finally break it? Because it's my favorite thing about the Sinner and Medvedev head-to-head is seeing Sinner completely turn it around, and now he's leading. So I kind of love consistency. I think it's better said that way. I like the consistency in the rivalries, but I don't mind the draws falling apart. Like that's just fun and exciting.
I think it's good to have like a couple of blockbuster matches a year. There's no doubt about that. And like that's the ones everyone remembers. It's just, I guess, you know, don't let that underappreciate what else can come out of tennis. Speaking of what else can come out of tennis, we've got the French Open coming up.
I can't believe it. I really can't. How is it already time for the French Open?
I don't know, but I'm so excited. I do enjoy the French Open. I have very sort of fond memories of the event, watching it as sort of a teenager. It used to come around during when I had exams, and that was kind of my escape from having to revise from exams, was watching the French Open in a lot of ways. And the very different vibe of playing clay court tennis is interesting. But yeah, you wanted to talk a bit about what we can expect from Roland Garros or the French Open, because when we record our next podcast, we're going to be halfway through it.
Yes. Yes, it's going to be odd because we're talking about this now without the draw being out or anything like that. And I think the French Open this year, too, is a little different only because of the Olympics. I feel like the Olympics this year has just turned everything upside down because you have players who are coming into Roland Garros realizing that when they come back for the Olympics, this is the exact same surface. So Roland Garros is coming May 26th to June 9th. The next time you see us both recording will already be into the first week of Roland Garros. We're expecting everyone to be there, but there's been a big question mark, especially on the ATP side, on who the contenders are going to be. Carlos Alcaraz is coming off of an arm injury. Sinner is coming off of a hip. Novak Djokovic is a TBD of what his form is like. Rafael Nadal is coming in and said, I don't know if I'm going to play. He's listening to it. He's so funny. He's like, I'm going to Paris, but I don't know if I'm going to play. I'm hoping he will. This might be a big sort of send off for him this year. So I think there are a lot of questions on the ATP side going into Roland Garros, which on the WTA side, it's like it's all set. We know who the contenders are.
Yeah, and it's basically do Sabalenka and Rybakina have a chance of beating Iga, but that's you know, doesn't mean to say there isn't going to be room for other things to happen in that draw. But I agree with you. This is the most wide open the ATP field has been since Nadal started playing.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, for 20 years.
Yeah. I am ready for it. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I am too. We do have other tournaments to get through first, but I guess for those who may be watching their first French Open, Anastasia, what kind of things would you say to look out for if you're watching on kind of TV?
So I don't know why I'm thinking this, but the French Open is about the fans, okay? French Open is about the French fans and but the moment you accept that, I think the viewing of the French Open will be great because the French Open fans love French players. So no matter who it is, it might be a French player who's ranked 1,011, who's playing against Novak Djokovic. They're going to cheer for the French fan and they get rowdy and exciting. And personally, I love it. I love because I all think isn't good fun and it creates an atmosphere. It's a lot of like a soccer or football match kind of atmosphere. So I think a big thing about the French Open is the fans and the drumming. Oh, then they have the drums and the thing. Oh, it can be a scene for sure. And I love that part of the French Open.
Scenes in Paris that there usually is, like with the whistling, and then they've got that tune they always do.
Yeah.
Do you think we could integrate, Anastasia? Do you think we'd pass for French fans if we went?
Yes, 100%. 100%. I think we got it down. It's a clay court tournament, so matches are usually longer. Good to know. But I like the French Open, maybe because Nadal won so much and he was my favorite. And I was like, let's get to the French and watch Nadal win again. But I love the French Open. I love the French Open fans. They definitely get rowdy. Oh, one of the best moments last year of the French Open, because here's the thing. I love the fans, but I love when the players also kind of get involved. And there was a match that Taylor Fritz was having against a French player. And throughout the match, the fans were awful to Fritz. They were just awful. And he didn't do anything until he won the match at the end. And he just kind of gave it to them. Yep. Oh, if you see the photo, maybe I'll use that as our podcast art for this one. It'll be that or the Rome Stadium.
There was a hardcore British Taylor Fritz fan on Twitter who has that moment as his profile picture.
Yep. It was a moment. It was. So you'll get a lot of those in Roland Garros for sure. But yeah, I think there are, we're not sort of, there's a big elephant in the room. Novak Djokovic is playing next week as well. I was telling Nick before we started recording that I was going to try and take the week off before Roland Garros just to take a break and recover and refresh. And then Novak Djokovic decided to get a wild card into Geneva. So might not be watching him play this coming week, but just so that you know, he is playing there. There is a possibility that he gets to play Andy Murray in his second match or his second round, because he gets a bye in the first round. And if he does, I will be watching that. But otherwise, I think I'm going to be quiet next week and kind of rest up.
I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be trying to take a tennis light week approach. I'll probably be checking results, especially in Geneva, Strasbourg as well for the WTA. There's a 500 going on there. And that's an opportunity for a lot of sort of the players who maybe aren't in that big five to get some momentum behind them. I think that's going to be interesting. And obviously, if there's Djokovic Murray, the entire tennis world's going to be watching that one, because those two haven't played each other in 7 years. They almost played each other last year, I think, but Murray got food poisoning in Madrid. So that kind of ruined our fun there. But we probably ruined a lot of things for Andy Murray as well. But we have to, but we'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, that's lots of things to be excited for. We will record a mini pod next week, probably as Roland Garros is getting underway, and we'll enjoy it. But I guess we should move on to our players of the fortnight. So to wrap up, so Anastasia, who's yours?
My player of the fortnight is Tommy Paul. Tommy Paul he's an American player. He's ranked 14 in the world. And in the live rankings, we'll see if he keeps that on Monday. But in the live rankings, he's number 14 in the world. He's a number 2 American after Taylor Fritz. And he has just really impressed. This tournament, I think, was really, really big for him. You might have started hearing his name last year when he made it to the semifinals of the Australian Open. He had some great results there last year as well, where he beat Alcaraz in Toronto, and he had a big run at the US Open. I know his match against Ben Shelton was must-watch TV last year at the US Open. And yeah, he has a great game, a lot of variety, and it's all clicking for him, I think, at the moment. And he got to the semifinals in Rome after he had beaten Medvedev, who he lost to at Indian Wells. So, he's having a great run. I think he's definitely a player to watch. I was joking, but not really, about him winning the French Open, because I think he has it. I think he has that sort of motivation now to kind of get in there.
I think he won the under-18s tournament, the junior title.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. He won the Junior French Open. He does have history on clay. I think he was telling Tennis Channel, I think actually, that he practiced a lot when he was younger on clay. Granted, it was green clay, like the stuff we have in America, but still, I think just in general, it's nice to see a crop of American players come up. Taylor Fritz, Ben Shelton, Francis Tiafoe, and now Tommy Paul just rounding it out and, knocking on the door of Grand Slams, which is really what I think American male tennis needs, is that Grand Slam champion. And they're getting there. They're getting closer. So Tommy Paul, keep, look out for him.
Yeah, it shouldn't be far away. We talked about Ben Shelton earlier. But yeah, so my player of the fortnight, I think, is a player that kind of wraps up a lot of what we've been talking about what the good things about tennis are and about the things we're excited about. Challenges, about stories, and about players who can give us good matches without necessarily being the best in the world. You probably won't hear her name on the show again. Her name is Rebecca Šramková. She is a Slovakian tennis player who had to go through qualifying to get to Rome and made the last 16 of the Italian Open, beating Katie Bolter and then beating Sofia Kenin, who likes it in Rome and has some good results here, and then took Yelena Ostapenko down to the wire in their match that went to a deciding tiebreak. Šramková is going to break into the top 100 as a result, which means she will be able to play Wimbledon automatically. First time in her career, she's got that high up, and which is interesting because she's going to be playing tomorrow in Roland Garros qualifying, in the French Open qualifying. So there you go. For someone, I think that if we want to highlight someone who can give us great stories from anywhere in tennis, Rebecca Šramková is it.
Great. I love that you brought her up. I think, like you said, especially when you make it into the top 100, anything can happen. That's the joy of tennis. It could be anyone's day.
And if you're thinking like she's like this next big thing player, teenager. No, she's 27. She was born in October 1996. And that's not old, but it's late for someone to make a breakthrough. But no matter how old you are, that breakthrough is important. I mean, look at how many other players have done that like later in their careers. And still gone on to have some great success. So this is going to be a big moment for her, years and years and years of hard work and effort are finally starting to pay off. And she's going to start earning herself a decent payday from playing a sport that she loves and that we love.
Great shout. Well, that's all we have for you today on Ground Pass. Please follow us on all social medias. Leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple Podcasts. It really helps when you leave us a review. And feel free to write a comment in the review. I read all of those once I get them. And we would love to hear what you think about the podcast, what you'd like us to do differently or add, or what helps you more listening to the podcast. So from Anastasia, who's really sleepy, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week or in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you'll see me.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.